if you have a question, if you have a question that you don't want to go on YouTube, you can just hold off on that until I turn off the recording at the end, and then you can ask it then. Any questions about anything at all? All right. Well, if anything comes up over the course of the Bible study, just go ahead and ask. But I thought it was recommended that we do a Bible study, and I've actually been, uh, I've probably read the entire Bible, but I don't think I've never read it just like from beginning to end. I've read every section of the Bible probably multiple times, but I started with Genesis and I've been listening to the Bible and I hope, God willing, to get through the whole thing just from beginning to end. So recently I read the entirety of Genesis and I was just reminded of how beautiful it is and why it's in competition for my favorite book of the Bible. But Genesis is so important because it's got all these covenants in it, and I want to make sure everybody's got a foundation and that they understand what a covenant is and why it's important. Because it's really hard to understand any part of the Bible if you don't know what a covenant is. So I thought we would just kind of start with, Genesis 1 and 2, God's first covenant that he makes with mankind, and kind of go from there. Hopefully this material isn't going to sound so familiar to some people that it's boring, but it is the scripture. So oftentimes, even if we hear the same thing more than once, it ends up being we maybe hear it in a different way. So um, for starters, what is a covenant? Does anybody know what that is? It's not a word that comes up in modern contexts very much. Um, Anybody know what a covenant is or have a way to describe it? Has anybody been in a covenant before?
It's a promise, right? An agreement,
Promise?
almost like an agreement and a promise.
Yeah, so a promise is a big important part of it and an agreement. Um, I kind of like that you didn't say contract, even though that kind of sounds like a contract. It's not a contract, but it's similar to it. Dr. Bergsma, my professor, would define a covenant as an extension of kinship by oath. In other words, you take someone who is not in your family, and through a process of swearing an oath, you make that person a part of your family. You create a familial bond with that person. So it is an agreement, it is a promise, but specifically, it's one that extends kinship, that makes you a part of the family. Dr. Dr. Scott Hahn would add to that definition a little bit, and he would compare and contrast a covenant with a contract, and he would say a contract is an exchange of goods. So I'm going to enter into a contract with you that says I am going to give you this much money and you are going to give me a car. The difference between that and a covenant is that while a contract is an exchange of goods, a covenant is an exchange of persons. So I don't say I'm going to give you this and you're going to give me that. I say I'm going to give you myself and you are going to give me yourself, and that is going to make us part of the same family. All right. Does that make sense so far? All right, good. So examples of modern day covenants. Um, Adoption is a covenant, right? You take someone who is not blood related to you and make them a member of your family, make them your son or your daughter. Marriage is another example of a covenant. Sometimes it's described as a contract, but covenant is actually a much better word for it because it's a gift of self, right? It's a husband and a wife giving themselves to one another and creating a bond with each other, right? They meet someone who is not a member of your family, you get married, and now you are one family together. So it is an exchange of persons and it is a covenant. So the Bible is all about a covenant. It's about a covenant that God makes with us, with humanity. So God is essentially taking human beings and all of creation really, and making them part of his family, extending a relationship to them. All of the Bible is just trying to communicate that message. It is the central idea, the central concept of the scriptures. And it doesn't take long to get into God's covenant making process. It's literally the first thing he does in the Bible is make a covenant with creation. So I figure let's just start reading Genesis and we'll go really slowly through this. Um, because sometimes I just find that I like to ask questions and kind of trigger some reflection about different ideas and stuff that may or may not directly be related to the covenant. But let's kind of read slowly and get a good, juicy reading of Genesis chapter 1. Bernard, do you want to read Genesis 1 for us?
Sure.
And just go nice and slow because I might be stopping you once in a while.
Just start right from the beginning.
Yeah, just right from the beginning.
Okay. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the face of the waters.
All right, let's stop there just for a second. So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then it describes the earth. Okay. Um, so how does it describe the earth? What is the description of the earth there in verse 2?
Like a waste?
Yep. I thought someone was going to say something, but verse 2 it says the earth was without form and void. Without form and void. So without form, what does that mean? It kind of means that there were no distinctions, right? There was no difference between land and sea. There was no difference between sky and earth. It was just formless. And then the word void means empty. Those two words are really important because as God creates, he's going to create by solving both of those problems. The first 3 days of creation are about fixing the problem of formlessness, and the second 3 days of creation are about fixing the problem of emptiness. The first 3 days, we're going to see God start making distinctions and start organizing sections of the world. The second 3 days, he's going to take those sections and start filling them with things. And darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the face of the waters. Um, that's really deep. I'm not going to go too much into that right now. There's some typology going on there. I think it's just interesting, though, that waters are mentioned, and it's really important that we know two things about water. First of all, water tends to precede life. In the ancient world, water precedes life. There's not going to be any life if there's no water. When plants spring up from the ground, it's because they get a good rain. Even when a baby is born, it happens after water breaks, right? And so there was this kind of connection in the ancient mind that before life and order emerges, there's always water first. Okay. So we can talk a little bit about the typology that's going on here. The same is true with baptism, right? Because baptism brings us new life through waters. Okay. So there's a little bit of a baptismal image going on here. You have the Spirit of God, you have these primitive waters. Um, The other thing you need to know about water is that in the ancient world, water is a symbol of chaos. Has anybody ever been out on the ocean during a storm? You have, Bernard? Is there a story behind that?
Well, it's just pretty crazy. I really like being on the water. I like boats,
Yeah.
and I've just learned how dangerous it is, very dangerous. And one minute you think everything's okay, and before you even know it, you're in serious trouble. And
Yeah.
so just always, it's like fun, but very, you have to be careful at the same time to have fun. You
Hmm.
have to be very cautious the whole time and be kind of ready for something to go wrong.
Yeah. I I don't go sailing that much, but I have been my family one time took a boat up to Canada. We were living in Seattle at the time, and there was a good storm that hit while we were going up there, and we all got seasick, and the boat actually went airborne a little bit while we were trying to go up there. It was crazy. It was wild, and I'm really glad I didn't see the finest hours before going on that ship, because if you've seen that movie, it's a true story about one of those giant shipping vessels that literally breaks in half at sea because it hits rough waters during a storm. So I bring this up because this is a reality for the ancient world. Okay, every time that you have been on an airplane, imagine if you were on a boat instead. You would probably become very familiar with the chaos of the waters and the sea. Even St. Paul, for example, was shipwrecked, I think, multiple times. We have an account of one of those shipwrecks in the Acts of the Apostles. So there was this idea that the ocean, that the waters are a chaotic place. They're a symbol of chaos. They bring forth life, but they are also themselves a symbol of chaos. Okay, so we want to start with that. What we're going to see here is that as God creates, He's starting with chaos and He's bringing the world into order, and He's doing that by solving the problem of formlessness and solving the problem of void. Bernard, why don't you keep going? I guess we're on verse
God
3.
said, oh, sorry. You
Yeah.
ready?
Hmm.
Okay. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning one day.
Great job reading. Yeah, we'll stop there for a second. Okay, so first day, God's working on the problem of formlessness. And the first distinction, the first separation that he makes in creation is he's going to have 12 hours of light and 12 hours of darkness. We're going to have light and we're going to have day and we're going to have night, right? He's going to separate light from darkness. So we're seeing him solving the problem of formlessness. God saw that the light was good, separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening and there was morning one day. Makes sense that this would have to be the first thing that he makes because we're keeping track of everything by days. So you'd have to make light first, in order for there to be a day. So that makes sense. Um, One thing I want us to think about as we read this text, why is God creating in the first place? Why is God even bothering to make the world? Any theories on that right now? Or maybe we'll come back. We'll keep reading and we'll come back to that later on. Go ahead, Bernard. Keep reading.
Can I say love?
Sorry, Claude, you said to love?
Creating out of love and for love.
Creating out of love. Yeah. So what does that mean to you? What does it mean to create something out of love?
That I mean, his intent is an intention is um, God being love. The intention is the creation is in a way the beginning of um, an invisible way of beginning of sharing of his love.
Hmm. Nice. So out of love, it's the beginning of a visible way for God to share his love. Um, okay, so we'll keep reading, and maybe we'll add to that as we go on. Go ahead, Bernard.
And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and separated the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and there was evening, and there was morning, a second day.
All right. So a lot of people don't understand what God is making here. And that's reasonable because this is tapping into an ancient understanding of the cosmos that we largely don't really adhere to today. But essentially, this is solving the problem of formlessness. And sometimes that word firmament is translated as the word dome. And the thing that you have to realize is that in the ancient world, above the sky, it was believed that there was more water. There's a psalm, I think, that mentions the waters above the heavens. And I wonder sometimes if that was maybe a theory for why the sky was blue, is because there was water up there. But basically, when God makes this firmament, this dome in the sky, he's basically separating the sky and heaven from where we are, from earth, right? He's creating a division between the heavenly realm and the earthly realm. So that's the way that we can think about this. That's day two. That's another way that we solve the problem of formlessness. All right. Let's keep reading.
And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good place to stop. So this is the third day. So this is the last day that God is going to solve the problem of formlessness, creating some sort of distinction. And what does he distinguish here?
Good that it's good.
Yeah, well, what's he separating? He's separating two things from each other.
The land and the water.
The land and the water. That's right. So day one, God separates light and darkness and gives them both their proper time. Day two, God separates the heavens from the earth, right? The waters above the heavens and the earth. And then day three, God separates land from sea. Okay. So God's created all of this distinctions that he needs to solve the problem of formlessness, but all of these realms are still empty. And so we're going to fix that problem now. And we go into day four. Go ahead, Bernard. And remember to keep thinking about why is God creating? Why is he doing all this in the first place? Go ahead.
God said, let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind upon the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, a third day.
All right. Uh, I think I missed something here. Hang on one sec. Let me read for a second. Yeah, so I forgot that that section is actually part of the third day as well, but we're already seeing God start to switch from formlessness into filling. So God separated the land from the sea, and then God starts to speckle the land with vegetation. We got plants yielding seeds. We got fruit trees bearing fruit. God's bringing forth all the vegetation and such. God sees that it is good. Evening, morning, third day. All right. So we're starting to fill. We're going to keep filling. Go ahead. We can carry on verse 14.
God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, a fourth day.
All right, great. So again, this is filling. Remember when we described what the firmament was? The firmament is like in the ancient Near Eastern imagination, it was like a dome that went over all the land where we lived. So above the dome, above the firmament, God is now putting all sorts of stars and planets. And we've got the sun and we've got the moon for the day and for the night, right? And it's good. It's good. Keep reading.
And God said, "Let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the firmament of the heavens." So God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening, and there was morning, a fifth day.
All right. So we got sea monsters, we got the ocean filled with animals, we got birds flying in the sky, and all of it's good. And God tells them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters, fill the sky with birds, multiply. It's interesting, this idea of being fruitful, right? You know, God makes some animals, but then he also wants the animals to continue that process of creation and, in a certain sense, make themselves. So there's this emphasis on the animals being fruitful. You also see that with the when we if we rewind back to the third day when God makes all of the animals, let the earth put forth all the plants. Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, fruit trees bearing fruit, and which is their seed. You notice the emphasis on the seeds, right? So all throughout this creation narrative, it's like God is creating, but then he also wants the creatures to continue this act of creation and to be fruitful and multiply, right? He wants his creation to cooperate with him and do what he does so that it flourishes, and that's how creation is supposed to work. We're going to see that that's going to carry on to the human beings as well when we get to them. Okay. Um, let's go. Why don't you continue reading? Go ahead. Are you getting tired of reading? Is this okay? You want me to hand it off to someone else?
Uh, Whatever you want me to do, I'm totally fine.
You're doing great. You're doing great. Why don't you keep reading?
Okay. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the cattle according to their kinds, and everything that creeps upon the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then
Nice.
God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit, you shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, a sixth day.
All right, we can stop there for a second. Well, let's just have some fun right now because there's just a lot of questions that we can ask. Let's go back to this question of why did God make the world? Any new insight on that as to why God, who is a perfectly happy and content God up in heaven, why does he bother making a universe? So Claude's answer is kind of the perfect answer, right? It's he made it out of love. But I also feel like what does that mean? What does it mean to make something out of love? Any insight or thought on that?
Just to clarify, Abuna, just I
Yeah,
think just to share his love, you know.
to share his love. Sure, to share his love. Okay, because God's up in heaven, he's perfectly content. He's probably looking at himself like, I'm awesome. And that's not pride. That's just an accurate description. God is awesome, right? So he's probably thinking like, I'm so good, I'd love to share myself with someone else, right? Um, is that a good way to describe it? I think Jennifer also wanted to say something.
Sure, I was going to say love by its nature um, needs to be given. I don't know if can't think of the right word, but love is not like by its nature is not meant to be kept to itself.
Hmm.
So if God is truly love, which he is, then he has to give of himself or he
Yeah.
wouldn't.
Yeah. That's so true. That's a great observation about love. I think that's completely true.
It's kind of weird though, right now. Like we're looking back at it, like he started creating and we don't exist, right? So it's kind of like it's like we're holding a camera and looking back, right, at what
Right.
through the thousands of years of God's revelation and His covenants, right, where we can. But I guess the question would be, would even have did it cross Adam and Eve's mind and thought, like um, after they were created, knowing God, did they experience that love? You know, I know I'm probably opening up a you know um, kind of warm here a little bit, um, but it's a great question. But you know, um, um, I, I mean, I'm like my answer is so um, I would say kind of small in compared to the reality and the omnipotence of God, and you know, and the mind of God and His intentions. You know,
Hmm.
like who am I to kind of describe, like, or even say why He started creating? You know, so
Yeah.
it's you know what I'm saying? I feel awkward,
Yeah.
like speaking
It's
to
it's
someone
kind of
who.
like reading Genesis reminds me of when I was a kid and my parents showed me like home videos that they had, but it was like before they were married and before I was born, and it was kind of humbling to think like, wow, there is existence there was existence before me. Like everybody was so
Yeah.
happy before I was born. Like no, I'm just
That's
joking.
so true.
But
Being the
but it's
young,
humbling, isn't it?
it's so true. Youngest in the family. I remember that exact same experience. Watching these old home movies, and 75% of them was, oh, that was all before you were born, Jennifer. And I was
Yeah.
like, wow.
I mean, I
Yeah,
think
no,
I say, oh, go ahead, Bernard.
I think Bernard, yeah, go ahead, Bernard.
I was like not really understanding at first because I wasn't the youngest, but then what you said at the end, I was a child of a younger sibling to a bigger family. And it was like kind of what you were saying too, where I remember going to all these events and it was like, yeah, all this stuff happened way before you were born. And almost everybody was almost like, kind of like retirement in age. And, that was kind of what I grew up around. And I was like, just kind of thought it was interesting.
Mhm. It is
Yeah.
very interesting. It changes your perspective. Yeah, Claude, you were going to say.
Yeah, but I just think that probably the last thing I'll say here, again, um, it's a very interesting question, but if I place myself at creation with my limited, mind and not knowing, again, before sin, to some extent, would Adam and Eve have that insight? I don't know, but I only speak in light of the new creation,
Mhm.
that God um, revealed to us, um, through our Christian faith. Um, and we know the new creation He gave us through His self offering and self sacrifice on the cross is that love and mercy being um, lavished upon us, made visible. And so that's, again, for me to be even answer or entertain that question, it's all grace, His grace, and in lieu of the new creation.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I would have no idea. I think I don't know,
Yeah.
but He's crazy in love with us, right? Too. So He's
Yeah,
like, it's
right.
like
He's
what?
he's in love with us through his son. So here's how I like to describe the creation and why God creates. And this is, I think, like it was good is kind of the key here. Um, there's two ways to create something. I like to describe, you can create as an engineer creates, or you can create as an artist creates, And I don't know who's ever seen the movie Apollo 13, but of course it's a great movie and it's a true story. And you've got these astronauts up, and they're trying to go to the moon, and there's this catastrophe that happens, and they're having to make do with what they have just to survive and make it back to the Earth. And they're stuck in the lunar module, which is not meant to carry three people for as long as they're there. And one of the problems that they have is their their carbon dioxide starts to build up, and they that because the lunar module is not able to absorb that much CO2, and so they're running the risk of carbon dioxide poisoning. So they radio down to NASA and they're like, "Hey, we have this problem." And NASA gets these five engineers together, and they just have this pile of stuff on the table in front of them. And they say, "This is all the materials that they have up on that spaceship. I want you to create a way to fix their CO2 filter." And they're just putting all this stuff together, and they're building something, right? They're creating something and they're doing it for a purpose because there's a problem and they have to fix it, which is really cool and really beautiful in its own way. But it's not really the style of creation that we're seeing here with God, because there isn't a need here that God is trying to fix, right? God's not trying to engineer a solution to a problem. God is creating here kind of like an artist who creates a painting, right? He's just, it's like he has this great idea and he's like, this is such a beautiful way, as Claude was saying, it's a beautiful way to express who I am, and I want to create it. And even like all of this making something and then stepping back and being like, yeah, it's good. And then continuing and then stepping back and saying, yeah, it's good. It just looks like an artist making composing a piece of music or painting a beautiful picture or writing a beautiful story and just stopping every once in a while to make sure what he's doing is good and then continuing. Can you see that?
I can totally see that, and I never have before. That's really cool. Um,
Yeah.
to think of it that way. And honestly, earlier when you asked why God created everything, I was tempted to just say fun, but I was like, no, there's got to be a better answer than that.
Fun is a really good answer.
And
Fun
then
is a
God
great.
said love, and I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's got to be it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a chapter in, I don't remember if it's Wisdom or Proverbs. I think it's in Wisdom where the creation of the world is described as God playing, as God just having fun. And that is exactly the way we want to see this.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really neat. Thank you.
Hmm. Yeah, so that's great. Okay, so that's only one of many great questions we could ask about this passage. God created man in his own image. Um, what is what does that mean? Why is man in God's image? Of all the things that God makes, this is the only thing where God says it's in his own image.
Feel like it works perfect though. Ever since Claude said that about love, and then we read all the scripture afterwards, everything I was reading, I was like, God allowed me and all his creation the ability to experience the love of God. And God's love is so amazing. It spawns and creates life.
Hmm.
And we get to share and be part of that. And that God loves us so much, he even created us in his image and likeness and is allowing us, if we choose, to share all the amazing gifts that he has to offer, and even more that we don't even know or have any idea about at all.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing how love works? It's so, if you study science and physics and stuff, the world is supposed to be tending towards entropy. It's supposed to be moving towards chaos. This story in the Bible is so against that. It's not a movement towards chaos. It's a movement out of chaos into order. It's a movement out of, a few things into being fruitful and multiplying. And it goes back to that point of love doesn't want to be isolated. It always wants to share itself. And so God wants to share himself with something else. So he makes this beautiful world, but this world is full of love. And so this world has to be fruitful and multiply so that it can share itself with itself. And it's this totally counter entropy force moving from chaos into order. Um, but yeah, so love, right? When I was describing how God made the world, I was looking at a human experience of I have this great idea, let me make a piece of art, right? And how an artist creates. The reason I can do that is because human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. So if I can find something in human nature and think, oh, maybe that's why created God created the world, right? I'm leaning on this idea that we're made in the image and likeness of God. What do you think specifically God is pointing to when he says you're made in the image and likeness of God?
Could it be, made for love, to love his image?
Mm-hmm.
God is love, and possibly, giving us that kind of intellect, the the free will to choose.
Yep. Yep. Our
I don't
ability
want
to
to.
love, our free will, these are all, see, and I think like these kind of come from the fact that God doesn't say anything else is made in his image. He only says that as humans. So whenever we see a human quality that we don't see anywhere else in creation, like the ability to marvel at beauty, the ability to love in a self-sacrificial way, the ability to be religious, right? And the intellect, like you said, the free will, on a level that animals don't have. Like that's these are all part of the image and likeness of God that humans have that no other creature has.
You know, Abuna, I don't know if everybody heard this before, but I mean, I learned it in my studies, in the Syriac class, and I believe you can correct me, but I believe it was Saint Ephrem, talking about creation and how, because that really moved me profoundly. And I mean, um, um, uh, when God created man, he created man as he was looking at his son, like, um, becoming man in a sense. Um, so he created us as a perfect image of his son, and and I think Saint Ephrem kind of goes beyond that a little bit, where he's, you know, and again, I don't want to. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that. That despite even not despite even if Adam and Eve did not sin, he writes, you know, in his reflection where um, the the Son of God, the second person of Trinity, will be incarnate as well and becomes man. Um, and um, I don't know if you have some thoughts on that.
I do,
Feature.
and I'm really glad you brought it up because I think it's a really beautiful point, and it's not a very popular theological idea because it contradicts Saint Augustine. So Saint Augustine says that Jesus, God the Son, would not have become incarnate if Adam and Eve didn't sin. Um, and Saint Ephrem and the Syriac fathers, and also in the West, I'm pretty sure Saint Bonaventure would have believed this too, like the Franciscan tradition. We say that, and both of these views are okay to believe, like neither one is heresy, right? We say that when it says God made Adam in his image, God was already thinking of the incarnate Lord Jesus. He already had this image of what the human Jesus would look like. And because God's outside of time. And so Adam and Eve were fashioned to look like the Lord, our Lord Jesus Christ. That's what it means to be made. Like, so it's funny because we sometimes we come up with all of these really radical understandings of this word image and what it means, and they're all good and true. But the Syriac fathers look at this passage and they say, what does it mean to be made in the image and likeness? And they're like, oh, it just means that they looked like Jesus. Like that's literally, they just looked like him, right? And if you look at an icon of Adam, I've seen an icon of Adam one time and it looked just like Jesus. Like the face of Adam looked like the face of Jesus. And that's the point that they're making is that Adam was made in the image and likeness of Jesus Christ. So even though chronologically Adam was made first, metaphysically Jesus pre-existed Adam. And so Adam can be made to look like Jesus Christ. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's just beautiful. I mean, I was so
yeah,
moved by that. And, you know, with St. Paul, right, calling Jesus as a new Adam, right? And
right.
that's, so it kind of correspond with that. And of course, the tradition of the church calling Mary as a new Eve, uh,
Hmm.
but of course, she's not divine. But um, um,
That's huge. So Saint Irenaeus, writing in the year 140, would use the word recapitulation to describe Jesus's relationship to mankind, which, re is a normal prefix to hear, but cap means head. So recap means to basically to put a new head on humanity. So where originally the head of humanity, the original father, the origin of humanity was Adam and Eve. Jesus enters into the timeline and recapitulates humanity as the new Adam and Mary as the new Eve, so that they are now the new heads of humanity. They are now the origin of the human race when we are born into new life, right? So instead of having a sinful origin, we now originate from Jesus Christ. We're getting into really technical theology now, but it's pretty interesting.
Does am I mistaken? Does that kind of relate back to what we talked about in the very beginning? Is what is a covenant?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it definitely does. So the way that Jesus does that is by making a covenant. And that's kind of where we haven't even gotten into the seventh day yet. I guess we'll get into it next time. But why does God make the world in 7 days? Well, seven is a covenant number. And so that's kind of where you get the punchline of, oh, God was making a covenant with the world, right? And so when Jesus enters into the scene, the covenant gets broken. There's a lot of sin. This relationship that God's trying to build with us, we keep sinning, and it puts a strain. It hurts that covenant, that relationship with God. And we do that over and over again. And so Jesus comes onto the scene, and he's going to make a new covenant, and he's going to go even deeper than the original covenant. He's going to make a new creation. That's the only way to fix it at that point. You can't take the broken covenant and keep putting band-aids on it. So Jesus doesn't make another broken covenant. He goes deeper and makes an altogether new creation so that we can be forgiven and we don't have to carry the sins and the scars of the past. And I just love to use that image every time I go to confession, right? It's not like it's my old relationship patched up with a bunch of band-aids and you're tied up with duct tape or whatever to try to keep the covenant going. It's a new creation. It's a new healing. It's a new relationship with God, and it's been restored to perfection. So yeah.
Beautiful.
Abuna, when you mentioned that word recapitulation, my ears kind of perked up because the last time I heard that word, the environment I was in was when I was in college studying music. So,
Mm.
um, taking a class where we had to analyze Bach's music. And so, like, basically, it was, he starts with a theme in the music, and it can be somewhat simple. And then all these other instruments and variations to the theme are added into it until it gets to the point where the theme is no longer really the theme, it's a new theme. And then enters the recapitulation, they called it, which is like the theme comes back.
Mm.
And so um, that was kind of cool, especially with the backdrop of you talking about how God is creating the world in the creative way that like music is made or art is portrayed.
Yeah.
That was
The
cool.
artist, Auntie, the artist's perspective on this passage is very valuable. Right.
Mm,
We need artists to understand what is going on here. And it wouldn't even surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the reason musicians use the term recapitulation is because of Saint Irenaeus. I don't have any proof of that,
yeah,
but the field of music is so influenced by theology,
yeah.
and it's very much, people take this passage about God creating an ordered universe and the discovery of music and intervals and half steps and octaves is all about philosophers trying to discover the order that God etched into the universe in sound, right?
Mm,
Um,
Taking
so for example, what do you call like the devil's interval or the devil's triad or whatever is
not the
how many
golden,
half steps is that?
it's not the golden triangle, right? Like the visual thing, the 2/3
Yeah, there's a
pyramid. I mean, the golden pyramid, where it's like visually, that's not what you're talking about, right?
I don't think so. No, there's a certain interval in music that was never used in sacred music because it created a very dissonant sound or like a very unresolved sound, and it also happened to be six half steps.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
remember.
And
Yeah.
and then you add the seventh half step, and I think you end up with like the most resolved sound, which is, I don't know. I'd have to look it up. I remember like
What
reading
happened?
about this and being really amazed by it, but
Yeah.
um, people see that numerology and they think, wow,
Not
that
four.
makes
It's
sense
not 1 4
biblically.
5. Is it?
Mhm.
It's not
Sorry,
the one.
Bernard.
It's not 1 4 5. Is it?
I'd have to bring my keyboard out and look at it
I
again.
hope not.
I know because I know that the whatever I think it's the one that they use in rock and roll a lot, and it I think it's just whichever the distance between the root note and whichever other how many half steps or whole steps. That's, I think that's
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's honestly, it's used in sacred music all the time now too. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, right? Because I like to think of it as the Great Friday of intervals. It's that moment where Jesus dies on the cross and the devil appears to have power. And then as long as you bring it over to that, if as long as you add that next half step and resolve it, right, that's your Easter Sunday. But anyway, we're getting off into a big time tangent now, but
Oh, that
I,
was cool though. Thank you.
yeah, yeah, this is fun. Okay, so I do want to mention though, I guess we'll kind of wrap up here in a little bit, but God created man in his own image. So there's a little bit of poetry going on here. We call it parallelism specifically. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created him. Okay, so you've got three clauses there in verse 27, and every one of those clauses uses exactly the same words, except in the last clause, the word image is replaced with male and female. So I feel like the text there is trying to tell us that part of our being made in the image and likeness of God has to do with our ability to have a spousal love for one another in the context of marriage, right? The fact that we are male and female and this came up earlier, we are made to have a relationship um, with the opposite sex and to have a family and to have children in that context, be fruitful and multiply, that somehow that is what it means to be made in the image and likeness of God. And that observation is the foundation for St. John Paul II's theology of the body, right? This is where St. John Paul is going to look at the Trinity and start talking about the Father loving the Son and the Son loving the Father, and that the product of their love is the Holy Spirit. And we are reflecting that kind of love when we are living in that nuptial bond and creating another human being through that love. So maybe someday we'll do a session on the theology of the body. But if you're curious, that's a really important passage for the theology of the body.
Abuna, could the likeness
Yep.
be the likeness, the image, you think of image as a picture, and um, uh, and the likeness would be, I guess, of course, the likeness of Christ, um, showing us, revealing fully himself um, when he became incarnate and lived among us. But so could the image be more towards the love of the Trinity, and the likeness be more of like the way he revealed himself in time, or could the image and likeness, is there a distinction, between the two? Um,
Different church fathers will say different things. I've heard some of the Syriac fathers say, I believe what they say is that every human being is made in the image and likeness of God. No, sorry. Every human being is made in the image of God. And no matter how much you sin, you are always in the image of God because that's what it means to be human. But you might not be in the likeness of God. So when we sin, what it does is it takes the image and it distorts it so that we no longer resemble God. We're not in his likeness anymore. It would be like if we're all mirrors of God, but when we sin, it's like we make the mirror really dirty. And so we can't see God in ourselves the way that we're supposed to because we've distorted his image, right? We've lost that likeness to him. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's different church fathers that talk about it, and that
Mm,
I like the way that that's described because
mm.
you don't want to say like the Calvinists do that sin has just totally destroyed us so much that we've lost the dignity altogether that comes from being made in the image and likeness of God. So the Syriac fathers say, well, no, you're always in God's image. Like that's just what it means to be a human being. You don't become a different creature when you sin. But that doesn't mean you have God's likeness, right? If you're not acting like God, if you're not living in a godly way, that's clearly you don't have God's likeness in you, even if you are in his image. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of how I saw it. That's why the likeness I was kind of seeing Christ in action, and how my life is a reflection of Him in action. Reflecting kind of more of the um, ultimately, of course, to be a reflection of and choosing to always love. To be love, and to show mercy and so on and so forth. And I guess it would be more of a you know less of grace and more of grace, right? I mean, the more I sin, the less grace in me, and the more I grow, in um, um, I guess closer to God. I grow more in grace, and participate in His life, and so
Hmm.
that grace is going to help me to be more like Him, reflect Him. Um, um, But I like the description you shared with us regarding the image. The image is always, that's kind of, it's like the picture. That's why I say image, image. I'm like, it's that image of God that it's always there, but it gets distorted through sin. Um, uh,
Yeah, we talk about that a lot in the ritual for baptism.
yeah, that's beautiful.
There's one other thing I want to say about the word image, and then we'll wrap up. I just have to grab something. So in the ancient world, we've kind of lost this meaning to the word image. Um, if I hold up a picture and I say, suppose I hold up a picture of like a family member, I hold up a picture of my dad, and I say, this is an image of my dad, right? And you look at that picture, and you know that you're not looking at my dad. You're looking at something that represents him, all right? In fact, I'm not looking at Jennifer and Bernard right now. I'm looking at a screen that is producing pixels in such a way that represents you pretty well. I'm not really looking at you, right? In the ancient world, if you use the word image, you are saying that when you look at this thing, you are looking through it into something else. It's like a window, okay? I can look through a window and see a tree. And so when it says that we are in the image and likeness of God, it's a lot like saying we are a portal to God, right? I can look into a human being and see God somehow. Um, that's not the way that we use the word image today. Image means symbol, it means representation of something else, but it's not really the thing that is being represented. But in the ancient world, that's the meaning that image carried, right? I am looking at this representation, but I'm not just looking at it, I'm looking through it into the thing that is being represented. So it elevates the status of the human being to say it's not just that I look like God. It's that someone can encounter God through, I can be a vessel of God. God can be in me. and someone can have access to God through me because I'm in his image. I'm an image of God. Does that make sense? It's kind of hard to describe because we don't really have a symbol for that today.
No, it makes sense, I think, but I think I can see though again the importance of the likeness.
Hmm.
If we're not living that part, it's hard to see God in person when they're
That's right.
choosing, you know. But I and so you know, like um, I mean, you hear that people encountering like saints, right? Oh, he's a saint. I see God in him, right?
Hmm.
Saint
Hmm.
Charbel. They used to say that. Saint Namatallah Hardini, you know, even the monks, you know, it's like, you know,
And John Paul II. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, they experience God there, but that's only in the reality of them daily desiring to allow Christ to live in them, you know, and through them, and living that uh, the teachings of our Lord Jesus Christ, you know, living in the grace of God, and I think that's just so important. You know, it's
That's
just
right.
so important. You
Both
know,
of them are very important. I want
uh,
to bring this up. The reason I bring this up is because this is the same theology that goes into iconography. And people don't understand the significance of icons. An icon is not a symbol, it is an image. It's not a picture, it's a window. When you look deeply into an icon and reverently and full of faith, you are no longer looking at a depiction of what you're looking at. You are looking at the saint. Okay? If I look at Mary here with the eyes of faith, I can look through this icon to see Mary. I can look through this icon to see our Lord. All right. And maybe that's hard to understand, but that is the original intention and understanding behind icons. That's why icons are not pictures. It's a key difference. And hopefully, you'll never look at an icon the same way again, knowing that this is an image in the biblical sense. It's not just a representation or a picture. I
mhm.
will sometimes stare at this icon for like hours, just looking at Mary because I want to see her and our Lord. And it's a very beautiful thing, and it's been a little bit lost, right? Icons are considered to be art. They're considered to be beautiful pieces of painting and pictures, but there was a theology behind them that allows you. They're supposed to facilitate a mystical encounter with the being that is being depicted, and I feel like we've kind of lost that a little bit. So, trying to bring it back.
Yeah,
Yeah, we really have. I just finished reading a book about a man visiting Russia, and I just learned a lot about the Soviet occupation and how many icons were destroyed during that occupation. It's almost like in some ways the Christians don't realize how powerful and beautiful the icons are, but the
Mhm.
enemy of religion did, and tried to burn, um, and did in fact burn many of them, destroy many of
Yeah,
them. So
tragic. You ever walk into a Byzantine church and feel like you're being watched? I'm totally serious. That's exactly how I feel. You got those icons all around you. They're all looking straight forward, which
mm,
means it feels like they're all looking at you, you know? Yeah, the eyes move and everything. I think it's intentional though, right? You're supposed those saints are all there. They're physically there. And so it's triggering your imagination to be able to see realities that you wouldn't normally be able to see with your physical senses. So it's a
mm,
brilliant move by the Byzantines.
mm-hmm.
you know. Sorry, just real quick. I don't know why I'm just sitting here thinking. That's sometimes a problem, but I just it just came to me. I just it just came to me that first creation of 7 days, and God gave us seven sacraments to make us into a new creation.
Hmm.
I'm still going into this likeness. You know, it's just
Yeah,
you know
keep
like
it up.
what he
It's a fruitful meditation.
yeah, it's just powerful. Like, okay, what makes us that new creation? What He's given us? It's all His gifts, and
uh,
wow, it's a seven sacraments. Yeah, and so may we never take them for granted.
Yeah. Yeah, see, that's why that's why there was some discussion in the early church about, well, how many sacraments are there really, you know? And it's not a coincidence that people concluded, there's seven of them, you know, like there's I think seven
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
it does. It does.
Well, good. I'm gonna turn off the recording just in case anybody has a question that they want